You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So, Fremont Brewing Company is still using concrete blocks to prevent RV parking. So are the city of Seattle and the U.S. Postal Service. What's going on? What are we talking about? Let's break it down AI style. Let's break it down Allen Iverson style. Philadelphia 76ers. He was a guard. He had an interview where he went off on the fact that somebody had called him out on not being at practice. And he just went off and he said, talking about practice. And he must have said that 1,000 times. We're talking about practice. We're talking about EcoBlocks. Talking about EcoBlocks. That's what we're talking about. If you don't know what EcoBlocks are, there's big concrete things that are made up out of recycled material, stuff that would have gone to the dump. They compress it together, make this concrete deal. They weigh like 1,000 pounds or something. So, I mean, you got to have a special, equipment to move it. And companies will have EcoBlocks put up outside of their businesses here in Seattle or outside of the post office or outside of the city of Seattle buildings because they can't have these RVs posting up for, literally a year and a half and all the craziness that happens from basically you've got homeless communities living in RVs, and it interferes so greatly a lot of times with the businesses that are trying to, do business things, sell things, bring in customers, have employees come. And the two conflict. So you've got in a lot of these industrial areas, and I've physically driven around a lot of these streets, and it's just, they're lined with EcoBlocks. It's crazy. South Seattle, SoDo area, south of the Dome, even though the Kingdome no longer exists, it's still known as SoDo. You've got these EcoBlocks everywhere, and they're all graffitied up. And one of the pictures in the story that I'm going to read, it had a picture of an EcoBlock, and it said EcoBlocks, BLOX. Matta, M-A-T-T-A. EcoBlocks Matta. All right. Well, yeah, we understand that. And so you've got this massive conflict between businesses trying to operate and homeless people that are, one step away from homeless. They've got these RVs that are oftentimes, they park them. And with the whole coronavirus thing and the CDC saying, don't move anybody anywhere, the 72-hour rule in Seattle, which is every 72 hours, you need to move your vehicle on a public street, that's been kaput. EcoBlocks has been a solution for a lot of companies and a lot of, city of Seattle and U.S. Postal Service. That's the government. Well, they're not necessarily supposed to have these EcoBlocks, but they do. That's what we're talking about today. Before we jump on in, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies. And it's as simple as I read the news from that perspective. Let's go. All right. So Fremont Brewing. And before we get into it, Fremont Brewing, and one of the reasons I wanted to read this is kind of a shot at Fremont Brewing, not from my perspective, but from the perspective of the author here, in my opinion, because one of the owners of Fremont Brewing just got elected to the Seattle City Council. And I was 2 thumbs up on that because it's kind of like, all right, we're going to replace some of the children on the Seattle Council with adults. And if you have got what it takes to put a pretty good sized business together, like the Fremont Brewing Company, then even if I don't know you, if I don't know anything about your background, I'm going to give you a shot instead of a lot of the folks we already have in the Seattle City Council who have proven their effectiveness. Let's just leave it at that. All right. And the other reason I wanted to read this, because I love Fremont Brewing Company. I love their beer. And I know for those of you on the audio portion, you can't see this, but their Golden Pilsner has the coolest can in all of brewing, I believe. The only one that would be a second one to that would possibly be from Maui Brewing Company, and it's Bikini Blonde Lager, because you've got bikinis, you've got blondes, and you've got lager beer. I mean, who doesn't like a good lager? Because if you like lager, you'll like a Pilsner. They're light beers. They're think like Bud Light, but, kind of a little bit fancier. So Fremont Brewing Company has this can that says, "Because beer matters" at the top. It's got these cool colors. It's got this stork and these like psychedelic kind of colors. It's Golden Pilsner. It's just impressive. And it's a company in Seattle, and they are forced to literally put EcoBlocks out in front of their business. And don't forget that Fremont Brewing Company in the backyard had the double-decker recording homeless studio at one point in time. I don't believe the double-decker is there anymore. It has moved somewhere else. But the double-decker with the second floor of framed up area that the gentleman who owns that RV, and he installed a drum kit up top and a homeless recording studio that they sometimes play after hours. And by that, I mean in the middle of the night. And local residents, they, for some reason, they get upset when they're hearing, what was it? It was a Guns N' Roses song with a pretty impressive Rocket Queen. If you know Rocket Queen, the song, and you don't, it's okay. That's all right. It's an amazing drum intro, and it's probably pretty loud. If you were to hear that at like 3 a.m, and maybe your kids are waking up, "Mom, what's that sound?" You probably wouldn't like it either. So a company like Fremont Brewing is using EcoBlocks to keep this kind of influence from their store environment. Can't really blame them. It's what's going on. But if you get a chance, check out their cool beer cans. I mean, I don't usually make statements like that, but yeah, it's some cool artwork. After at least one formal complaint, the Seattle Department of Transportation has issued a warning. SDOT with a warning. We know what that means. Nothing, but no penalty. So they issued a warning, but no penalty to Fremont Brewing, the company co-owned by City Council member-elect Sarah Nelson. They issued a warning for obstructing the public right-of-way around its Ballard Brewing facility with massive concrete ecology blocks. Doesn't this sounds like an indictment? How dare you obstruct the exterior of your building, the right-of-way? You need to leave that open for random RVs to park there and never to be moved again for this foreseeable future. You need to open it up to that. All right, I get it. The flip side is, should we really have EcoBlocks littering the city? The answer is no. City of Seattle should be enforcing the 72-hour rule, which they're not, because you've got a massive homeless issue. And guess what? Probably half of Seattle's homeless live in cars. I don't know. I've heard that at times. And so it's part of this huge ongoing issue. And so local businesses are kind of forced to do whatever they can to continue staying in business, because businesses need to be in business to be a business. I know it sounds odd and I know it sounds crazy, especially to a lot of folks in Seattle who don't really see it that way. But I'm a business owner, and that's the way I see it, and then that's the way I'm going to call it. As Publicola reported last summer, EcoBlocks, so called because they are a byproduct of concrete production that uses waste that would otherwise occupy landfills, are an inexpensive way for business owners to prevent people living in their vehicles from parking on the street next to their properties. Now, I know what you're saying. Why in the world would you need to go to this extent? If you see some of the streets in Seattle, you'd be like, oh, okay, all right, yeah. Yep. From an aesthetic standpoint, EcoBlocks would be better. Even if they're covered in graffiti, they would be better. All right. Yeah, I get it. Because you get a street lined, it's not good. Because it's not just the vehicles. It's the raw sewage that oftentimes comes from the vehicles. It's stuff happening in the vehicles. Not all of them. Let's be fair. Let's be reasonable. But a good percentage of them, because that's just what we're working with, right? So since the beginning of the pandemic, when the city stopped enforcing a law requiring people to move their vehicles every 3 days, that's the 72-hour rule I was talking about, the blocks have proliferated throughout Seattle's industrial areas, which are the only place where people living in oversized vehicles can legally park. Well, the industrial area we're talking about, Fremont Brewing Company, that is not industrial. That is residential/commercial. And so business owners say that the presence of RVs and other types of large vehicles, such as box trucks, discourage patrons, and that large concentrations of RVs can lead to health and safety problems that impact their customers and employees. If you're an employee, if you are a consumer, a member of the public, and you walk up to a business and you are scared to go through this gauntlet of parked vehicles and the trash on the sidewalk and people living on the sidewalk, because you're going to have that as well, there's a high probability you're not going to patronize that business. You're not going to buy stuff from them. You may not do that. So that's why businesses have done this out of self-preservation. It's pretty simple. It's pretty clear. Obstructing public streets is illegal, but SDOT has treated EcoBlocks differently than other street obstructions. Instead of penalizing business owners for taking over a public space that belongs to everyone, as they might if a random person set up a tire fort or craft fair in the middle of the street, the department has responded to the proliferation of EcoBlocks by essentially throwing up its hands. Because what can they do? Could you imagine if a business got fined for EcoBlocks during this whole pandemic thing? Because what happened is at the beginning of the pandemic, the CD, and you probably already know this, and so you can tune out for the next, 15 seconds. The beginning of the pandemic, CDC said, don't sweep any homeless encampments, don't move people if you can avoid it, because you might spread the Rona. Well, that allowed basically homeless encampments to just proliferate. And we saw that in many, many, many communities. And then the whole 72-hour rule, they just basically said, no, we don't want people moving around, even if they're moving around in their own vehicles. We don't want that either. So we're just going to hands off on all these situations. So businesses have had to kind of come up with their own way of dealing with this. EcoBlocks. So what do they look like? They are a few feet tall and they're maybe 4 feet wide, and they're probably depth-wise, they're a couple of feet. And I think they literally weigh like 1,000 pounds. So they're heavy. They're not going anywhere. You hit one with a car, your car is going to not do well. The EcoBlock is going to be just fine. You might knock off a little bit of graffiti from the EcoBlock, but they're solid. I mean, it's a concrete block, right? It's like a portable concrete barricade. So obstructing public streets is illegal, but SDOT has treated EcoBlocks differently. So they've essentially thrown up their hands on enforcement of, you can't use EcoBlocks to just block off your own empire. That's a no-go. But so we've got this kind of underlying just understanding of, all right, we get that you don't want to have a whole bunch of broken down RVs in front of your business. We're going to let you do the EcoBlocks for a while, and we're going to, hand out a warning. You shouldn't have EcoBlocks out in front of your business. It's not legal to block the right of way, but we also kind of get what you're trying to do here. So we're not really going to do anything more than just a warning. So you've just got this alternate reality going on that the pandemic has created, right? Or that I should say governmental entities have addressed the pandemic, because they didn't need to do this. They could have just let things go and just kept doing things the way they did do things. But no, we had to change everything, including shutting the economy down. Just stuff we did during that, and may do down the future. I mean, we've got this new variant. Don't get me started. So this is just not true of Fremont Brewing, which received a written warning, but of many other businesses around the city's industrial area, as well as the U.S. Postal Service, which surrounded its Ballard sorting facility with EcoBlocks way back in August of 2020. Because they don't want to be that area that becomes RV, the street littered with RVs. Just don't want that. At the same time, United States Postal Service spokesman Ernie Swanson told Publicola that USPS got the okay from the city to put in the concrete barriers in response to a proliferation of RVs in the area. The Seattle Department of Transportation disputed this, calling the road blocking barricades unpermitted, but took no action. Those are unpermitted, meaning those we didn't issue a permit, but You can still have them. It's okay. We get where you're going. I mean, it's so obvious what's going on, but nobody's really identifying it. Those are not legal. Here is your warning. Are you going to do anything about it? No. All right, then I'm not going to do anything about my EcoBlocks. That's literally how this is going. So they're still there today. You've got the EcoBlocks there today, the post office. Graffiti covered and looking dingy compared to their more recently installed counterparts, EcoBlocks, in front of the BevMo anchored strip mall across the street. It's mind-blowing that I live in a city that businesses have to bring EcoBlocks because there's no enforcement of just long-term parking on the streets by anybody. I mean, anybody can just park there. You just bring your car and park there and live out of your car. I mean, it's just totally unregulated living. It's shocking. So businesses have come up with, let's bring in a dozen EcoBlocks, and at least we won't have to deal with the element of what comes when you've got a whole bunch of derelict RVs and vehicles and lawnmowers. In the case of Ballard, where you had Lawnmower Man up until just recently. I've had a few podcasts on that. You can check that out. Lawnmower Man. Crazy, right? You got a guy with over 24 lawnmowers living on the side of a busy street in Ballard in Seattle. Contacted for information about why the blocks are still in place more than a year later, Swanson said, the concrete blocks were placed in front of the Ballard post office as well as other neighboring businesses as a response to a proliferation of needles. Okay. Needles, human waste, and other hazardous materials being discarded on the property from the RVs. Okay. So it's either EcoBlocks or needles, human waste, and other hazardous materials. Take your pick. Which one you want to have outside your business? Yep, you got it. Okay. As of this date, the blocks remain not only in front of the post office, but also other businesses in the area. We have no knowledge that a permit was ever required. Oh, my word. You didn't get a permit for that EcoBlocks? You should go to jail. 1,000 whippings with a wet noodle. The city's proposal or process for dealing with Fremont Brewing ecology blocks was typical. After someone filed an anonymous complaint about the blocks in September, SDOT, Seattle Department of Transportation, performed an inspection and observed ecology blocks. What'd you see today? I saw some EcoBlocks. All right. Did you write up a report? Yes, I did. So SDOT observed ecology blocks in the street around Fremont Brewing, according to a notice SDOT sent to the company September 17th. We do not allow this type of use in public right-of-way due to traffic safety concerns as well as transportation and utility access needs. Never mind the fact that if the EcoBlocks weren't there, you still wouldn't be able to you'd still have public right-of-way issues due to the traffic safety concerns as well as transportation and utility access because the RVs don't allow any of that to happen either. And those aren't enforced either. So you've just got a lot of non-enforcement of everything going on. Please remove these unpermitted encroachments from public right-of-way by the compliance date indicated below, November the 10th. November 10th came and went. The blocks remained. About a week later, the case was closed. I mean, this is literally what's going on in Seattle. Did you warn them? I gave them a harsh warning. I said to move those blocks by November 10th. Did you follow up? Were you a good parent and followed up with what you said you were going to do? Did you enforce your rules? Nah, we just closed the case and moved on. All right, that's really going to show them. That's really going to show them who's in charge. SDOT spokesman Ethan Bergeson told Publicola the department followed standard procedure in responding to the complaint, meaning they did basically nothing but a bunch of bureaucratic paperwork. At this point in time, that's like all they can do, right? The first step in the enforcement process is to mail a letter to the adjacent businesses or property owners, notifying them of their responsibilities to remove the concrete blocks, Bergeson said. The purpose of this letter is to initiate a conversation with the responsible party so that we can find a path forward leading to their removal of the unpermitted concrete blocks. To date, we have sent letters of this nature to property owners and businesses adjacent to concrete blocks left in about a dozen locations around Ballard, Soto, and Georgetown. Our approach with Fremont Brewing has been consistent with the other locations. So what's happening? Well, you say consistency. What does that mean? Yeah, it means we, send out a notice and didn't really do anything. We did nothing. I mean, that's what we're doing in Seattle. Fremont Brewing owner and Nelson's husband, Matt Lincecum, who runs the company day to day, declined to comment for this story, as did Nelson. What are you going to say? Hey, take a look around at other businesses that haven't put up EcoBlocks. How does their business look? Just from a perspective, a little bit of a lens look-see there. What does that look like? Does that look good? No, it doesn't. EcoBlocks, they look better. Now, you might say people have a right to live on the sides of public streets in their RVs. All right, but the law is 72 hours. So you got to move those bad boys every 72 hours. You can't just plunk down. And that's been the issue, is that during the coronavirus, so many folks have plunked down and taken advantage of the lack of 72-hour rule. That's what we're dealing with. So Seattle Department of Transportation has the authority to take enforcement action against any business or government entity that obstructs the public street with EcoBlocks or other objects that make it impossible for the public to access streets, sidewalks, or parking strips. To date, it has not done so, beyond warnings like the one it issued to Fremont Brewing. Because if they find them or something, I think you would see a revolt by businesses. They'd be like, what? What on earth are you talking about? Because you're not enforcing all these other rules that impact us. So we do this one to protect ourselves, to protect our businesses, to protect our livelihoods, to protect our employees, to protect our customers. And you're going to fine us for that? Okay. All right. Yeah. As if to emphasize the city's lackadaisical approach to enforcement, Seattle City Lights has installed its own anti-RV fortifications at its Canal substation, located 2 blocks from the Fremont Brewing and the rest of the EcoBlock littered Ballard Brewery District. In addition to EcoBlocks in the street, the north side of the substation is walled off by 2 layers of fencing that completely obstruct the public sidewalk. All right, if those weren't there to obstruct the sidewalk, you still wouldn't want to walk on that sidewalk. So these public right-of-ways, either which way, they're a no-go. So I'd rather see the EcoBlocks. That's just me. That's my thought. We had the same thing with the East Precinct Police Station in Seattle. You had these concrete barricades because knuckleheads kept trying to break in and burn the police station and just basically destroy it after the whole CHOP thing. It was just a train wreck. They just couldn't stay away from trying to destroy the police station because nothing says activism like, destroying a public building. Just craziness like that. And so there was a line of concrete barricades outside. You had a metal fence. I think you had some razor wire on top. I can't remember, but it was a formidable barrier between the public street and the Seattle Police Department East Precinct. It was not a good look. It was, an escape from New York type look. It was rough. And the residents were like, we can't walk on the sidewalk. We're obstructed on the sidewalk. All right. Is there a sidewalk on the other side of the street? Well, yeah, but I want to walk on that one. Okay. Yeah, we're trying to protect a building that knuckleheads keep tearing on, and you're worried about crossing the street. And there's crosswalks every 100 feet or so. The whole thing to me was just like, all right, take your pick. Which one do you want? You want the building broken into, or you want to be able to walk on the sidewalk? You go with what you want. Oh, we want to walk on the sidewalk. All right. So a review of historical Google Maps revealed that the EcoBlocks were installed sometime after this past August when several RVs were parked along the south side of the substation. The fence, too, is new as of June 2021, per Google Maps. Several RVs were parked on that side of the substation, too. Since then, the RVs appear to have moved around the corner to a narrower residential street on the east side of the building. We've reached out to City Light as well as SDOT about the obstructions around the canal substation, and we'll update this post when we hear back. All right, you do that. We'll eagerly await. From the point of view of a property owner, ecology blocks solve an immediate problem. People living in RVs or parking large vehicles indefinitely in front of their business. It's not just parking a vehicle there. It's everything else that brings with it. And that's the stuff that business owners and property owners are trying to deal with. They're trying to come up with a solution. And that's, an EcoBlock is one solution. So people living in RVs or parking large vehicles indefinitely in front of their business, that's what they're trying to deal with. And that is what the city has failed to address. But the fact remains that even if the city continues to turn a blind eye to vigilante street obstructions, really? Vigilante street obstructions? All right. After the whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing, my girlfriend and I looked up the definition of vigilante in Webster's dictionary, online, of course. We don't have a dictionary at home anymore. Does anybody have encyclopedias at home? No, we just all got Wikipedia and we assume everything in there is correct and accurate until it's not, and then you just look like a moron. But vigilante just basically means taking the law into your own hands. So yeah, we're not going to allow other people to park their cars in front of our business. So in a way, they are, but I view it as more self-preservation than vigilante, right? So if the city continues to turn a blind eye to vigilante street obstructions, nothing will really change until the region stops ignoring the needs of people living in vehicles who make up as much as half of King County's homeless population. So there's that stat. Make up as much as half. So that's the bottom line. You need to work on that. The whole homeless thing, and you got half the population living in cars or vehicles or whatever. All right. So we've identified those problems, but businesses in the meantime still got to be able to operate and do their thing. And they've struggled enough with the pandemic, right? Not saying that these folks who are experiencing homelessness haven't struggled as well, but you can't just live on a street. That's just not how things work. There are places you can stay, and living behind a brewery isn't one of them legally. So got to rectify that. So you've got issues with the city. All right, we're going to let this go. We got to let this go as well. And that's kind of what we're living with until we start to get some resolution from this and the whole homeless population. And that's going to be an ongoing mess forever because it seems like it's just getting worse and worse and worse. In the absence of safe lots, that's where you can park your RV. Let's talk about that for 1 second. We have had safe lots in the city of Seattle. Guess what? People didn't want to live there. They didn't want to live there. They felt it was unsafe. They didn't like living by the rules. They didn't like having to do stuff they didn't want to do. So they shut down the safe lots. So, all right, you want to go back and try that again? Good luck. We'll see if it's different the second time around, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. So in the absence of safe lots, social services, and affordable permanent housing, people sleeping in their vehicles will continue to take up space in public. Yes, that is correct. And these businesses recognize that, and out of self-preservation, they're putting up EcoBlocks. All right. But no amount of semi-sanctioned street and sidewalk obstruction, semi-sanctioned, it doesn't appear sanctioned at all. So I would go back with, let's not be wimpy here. Let's just go out with no amount of vigilante street obstructions and sidewalk obstruction will fix the underlying problem. It's not fixing the underlying problem. And that's the perspective that I think we're missing here. These businesses aren't trying to fix a problem. They're trying to defend their turf. In the city, who they pay taxes to, large amounts of taxes, basically isn't helping them. So they're having to do something on their own. They're paying for these EcoBlocks to be installed. The city and county have dedicated virtually no resources to people living in vehicles who make up as much as half of the region's unsheltered homeless population. All right, that's a separate issue, and that needs to be addressed as well. Not discounting that at all. These are homeless population, people living in RVs, people living in tents, people living in parks. These are all kind of part and parcel of the same thing, right? And yet the city of Seattle seems to be this magnet for people living in these communities because we've made it so easy for them to exist in Seattle communities. That, hey, come on down. Free food, you got free healthcare, you've got free clothes. I mean, just the services that are set up are incredible. You've got free needle exchange. We've decriminalized most drugs so that people of limited means can, not go to jail. The extent to which we've made homelessness available in Seattle is kind of mind-blowing, especially when you go to another city, like, say, Oklahoma City, where I just was, and you don't really see this at all. I mean, you see a little bit of it, but it's like Seattle used to be. You'd see, one-off, two-off folks experiencing homelessness, but they weren't set up in camps along the sidewalk in downtown Seattle. They weren't just posted up in tents in these big communities. And that's kind of the real problem we're talking about. We're talking about RVs posted up along public streets just en masse. I did a video not long ago. When I say that, I mean, I talked in it. I did actually shoot some of the footage of the Green Lake video, Green Lake in Woodland Park. And it's Woodland Park. It's not Woodlawn Park. I missaid that before. And that was incorrect. I got that part wrong. And so I shot some footage for some of the time lapses and hyperlapses you see in that video. I'll take full credit there, with my GoPro, to no less, because I think the camera that you shoot the most footage with is the best camera for you, and one that I can stick in my pocket and hold in my hand while walking by some of these things that I film. I find that to be the least intrusive, and that's kind of just how I go about and do it. But, you've got situations where you've just got a lot of people living in communities that it's getting tough, and the communities are saying, and the businesses are saying, yeah, we got to do something. So they're basically, is it vigilante obstruction? Yeah, if you look at the true definition of the word, it is. But it's also, I would say, self-preservation, because the city of Seattle doesn't have the resources to basically deal with this whole situation, which is homelessness, people living in vans, people living in RVs, people building double deckers, people lining up, lawnmowers in the sidewalk. Whew. We've got it all. Come to Seattle. How's that for come on down. It's the greatest city ever. Yeah, it's like the city of Portland took out the one-page ad. Like, come on to city of Portland. We know we're quirky, and we know we've got, a scooch of some issues going on, but come on down. Odds are you'll make it through the gauntlet of our, crime-ridden streets. It's not that bad, but sometimes when you read the news, it's not good either. So, but from a tourism's perspective, I mean, what I read about a lot of times, you're like, these are not pro-tourism type things, unless you're really into kind of seeing, some areas of a city that have devolved and what those look like now. But you know what? You can just tune into the Seattle Real Estate Podcast and figure out what that looks like from that channel's perspective. All right. That's it for me on this one. I am done talking about vigilante street obstructions. I keep butchering that word. Vigilante street obstructions. All right. EcoBlocks. Talking about EcoBlocks. Well, we're not going to talk about EcoBlocks anymore. We're done. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for supporting the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. I will catch up with you on the next one. Until then, stay safe. We'll talk again. Bye for now.